One of the reasons I really wanted to come to do this thing live, I was hoping that people would be on the show so that they could ask questions for me to be able to answer directly. But that being the case, I'm still going to provide you before the end of the show to give you a kind of a practical guide on how to address any problem if you decide to live from this self. But before we do that, I want to introduce to you what is your mind. Remember, this show is about in the mind. I think it's time for you to know all about your mind. It's not just about your mind. It's all you need to know about the mind. One thing you should know, if you do not know yet, is that your mind is your house. Your mind is your well. Your mind is where you live from. Your mind is also God. I mentioned in the beginning of the show that God is mind. There is so many different imagination of what we think or believe to be our mind. So yeah, it's time for me to introduce to you what is your mind or what is the mind. Your mind is your house. Your mind is your personal construction, what you have constructed. When I say what you have constructed, I'm talking about your soul. What you have believed to be true is how, you know how you build a house? You buy materials, you buy concrete, you buy blocks, whatever material kind of house you want to build. It's the same thing that we have used to construct our mind. But before I get into that construction of our mind, I want to really introduce to you what is your mind. Your mind is your world. Your mind is where you live your life from. Your mind is God. This is your mind at the default state, how God created it. This is the truth about God and mind. You know, God created you in his likeness and in his image. And when God created you, God created just one mind. I know religious people, when they hear it for the first time, they might want to argue. But I will encourage whoever is a religious person, religion in the sense that you understand God from a human point of view. If you understand God and know God from a human, if you believe that you believe that you're a human being, and then you talk about God and you know God, from that point of view, you are seeing God as a separate entity from you. And that is where religion comes from. Because religion has preached that because of the sin of man, God had to separate himself from that man. And as a result of that, you can only go to heaven when you die. That is religious belief. So this is not this. If this is what you believe God to be, then what I'm going to share with you might not have any effect. It might not even work for you. But when you come from the point of view, from my own experience, I used to be a religious person. I used to go to church. I used to do everything that every religious person and description and prescription they prescribe. I did those things until God had to take me out of that bubbles and said, if you truly really want to know me, you have to get out of that so that I can show you me. I can introduce myself to you, directly as who I am. So that introduction, that knowing of my mind, of knowing God, is what I want to share, because this is the foundation of what will be able to help you to overcome no matter what comes your way. So the first introduction was that God is mind, and the mind that you have is a spiritual being, and that spiritual being is your God self, the one I spoke to you about, the you cannot see. In that God self, God had programmed everything. If you read the Bible, you say, I am God, I change not. I'm unchangeable. I am dependable. God is unchangeable. God is dependable. That means that everything that God has constructed is perfect in any ramification, and it is in order. So your mind, your programming, before God created you, when God created you, he put everything in its perfect position and made sure that the mind is perfect. Because if you say you are not perfect, what you are indirectly saying is that God is not perfect, because you are a manifestation of God. So when you know God in this way, in this point of view, when you know that you were created as a manifestation of God, God created you in his image and in his likeness. What that means is that God created you in his very pure nature. The essence of God is who you are. Every attribute of God is that same attribute that you are. But when I'm talking about this you, I'm not referring to the you have imagined yourself, you appear to be. I'm talking about the you cannot see, the invisible you, the one I call your God self. So when you know God in that point of view, when you know that God is my essence, I was created in the pure image and essence and likeness of God. That is you holding on to a new consciousness. That is you building your house based on truth. That is you understanding that even though it appears you look physically, you appear physical, but the true essence, your true self is spirit. So once you have those, once you know those truths are like foundations that you take and build into your house. Remember I said that your mind is your house. Your mind is your well, and where you live your life from. And it is also God, because you cannot give what you do not have. Once you have that consciousness that you are a spirit being, once you know those truths are the various material, just like you buy a block, you buy dry walls, you buy cement, you buy concrete, each and every of these things that you put in your house, it's meant for a particular function, it meant for a particular use. You make sure that you put the foundation with enough concrete so that no matter what comes in, that foundation is able to be so strong that even the strongest wind cannot blow it off. It's the same with your house, your spiritual house, your God house, your real. The reason why a lot of people are going through so much pain and suffering is because they do not have their foundation. Their foundation is not built on the truth. Some people have cultural foundation. Some people have religious foundation. Some people, their foundations are built on opinions and beliefs. That doesn't stand the wind of. It cannot overcome stress. It's really important that you have a foundation. So I don't know if you have any question as you watch this video. You have any question, ask me and I'll be happy, most delighted to give you any clarification that you need about this thing. So your mind is your world. We have all constructed our world. What we see, what we do, how we react, and those things. It's all inbuilt in our world. But the mind at its default state is God. It's spirit, completely pure. It has always been God. It has always been big. It will always be God. And it is God even now. Before I even get to that point, let me just emphasize this truth. So this is your truth. This is my truth about God and mine. In a way, this is a story of what God is. The story is about the true and real essence of God. The story really is about knowing what God really is in relation to the world you are living in. The reason why you must know about the mind, because it will help you to define what truth is. What is your truth in relationship to God and the world you have created for yourself? How do you see God? How do you see God in relation to your own happiness and your own peace? So if you want to make your story about God, it has to be about God to the purest form. It's not God and. Because whenever there is God and something else, that is an introduction of duality. You have to have a singular vision to know that this is who God is. God is spirit. God is pure. God is holy. God cannot behold iniquity. God created you in his image and in his likeness. God constructed your mind completely, purely. It is God. And everything in your mind is perfect, is made perfect, and it is in his place. So when you see God in that way, when you see yourself, that you are spirit, you were created in the pure essence of God. You are created pure spirit. So how do you, and you realize then that you are not separated from God, because the belief that we are separated from God is the greatest lie that has ever been told. And it is the reason why so many people are in darkness. So many people are living in pain and suffering. It is because we have believed that we are separated from our pure essence. We are separated from ourselves. But we are not. Even in the midst of this darkness, you are still God. You are still in that essence, in that purity that God created you. So for those of you who are, if you just notice that I keep looking this direction, is because as I'm doing this, I'm also doing it live on Twitter. So just in case you see me watching, I'm just saying if I have any question. Let me know in the comments below. How do you see God? How do you see God in relation to your happiness and peace of mind? Do you see God like someone who is in some heaven up in the sky? Or do you see God as someone who dwells in your heart, or who you are truly? Because when you see God as somebody who is separate from yourself, who is somewhere, then that separation itself, the separation is in itself a problem. Because seeing God separately from who you are, being in that same darkness, in that same pain, in that same sorrow, that most often we find ourselves. So that is why religion that's why I always like to distinguish between religion and God. I don't even use spirituality, because spirituality in itself, there are so many different interpretation, definitions of what spirituality is. Some people, spirituality involves their cultural beliefs, their traditional beliefs, and so many mixture. That's why I'm really emphasizing I'm calling God. And anybody who is offended by me calling it God, then I don't think this is for you. So what I know is that for you to be able to end your suffering, you have to really know who you are spiritually. When God sees you, what does God see? Because religion has told us that we are separated from God, and the Adamic sin has separated us from God. And so we have lived in isolation. We have lived alone. That isolation wasn't just a separation from God, but it even has caused us to live separately from each other. That some people are so lonely to the extent that they can even hurt themselves because they are so lonely. Everybody has become so selfish in the way that we always just want to grab what is in it for me, what is in it for me, not knowing that the impact of the teaching about you being separated from God has so many different negative ramifications that I don't want to distract myself from this video to go into those details. But what I need you to know is that those teachings, those religious teachings, those religious beliefs, those things have led to the introduction of so many different beliefs and opinions. As a result of so many different beliefs and opinions, the truth has been lost in that process. And now I'm on a mission to bring back the truth, the purity of what truth is. What is God? God is your mind. There's only one mind, but you have been made to believe that there's another mind. And that is the mind that all the issue, the darkness, the pain, and the suffering is coming from. And as you hold on to that mind, as you hold on to those religious beliefs, those traditional beliefs, all the teachings that mankind and other things, as you hold on to those things that we have been taught, all those religious beliefs and all those things, it's not going to help you to end your suffering. It's not going to help you to end your depression, your anxiety, your trauma. It's like taking darkness to fight darkness. Taking darkness to fight darkness. Sometimes they'll take darkness and then use the light of God's word to come, hoping that it's going to give a quick fix. You know, they say people are smart, human beings are smart. But when you look at life from a spiritual perspective, you really get to understand why God said that the wisdom of man is foolishness. Why you think that the wisdom of God is foolishness as well. Because there is no way a human being, somebody from a human religious perspective, can really perceive the things of God. Because the Bible says that to be carnally minded is death. To be spiritually minded is life. The only way you can find life, the only way you can find happiness is through God. And this is why it is on this basis that I want to propose to you. I want to introduce to you a different way to end your suffering and live a better life. Once you get to understand that your mind is God, your mind is spirit, your mind was constructed perfect, everything was put in place, everything is still in place. There is no lack, there is no deficiency in you. So that God self is your mind, that God self is who you are. And this who you are is your God self. It's pure, it's perfect, it's enough, it's complete, it's sufficient. So for you to be able to apply these things that as I go on into this show, I'm going to be introducing to you, for it to work for you, you really have to look at yourself and look at this mind. I want to introduce you to God. By introducing you to God in a way that you understand that this God is not a God somewhere in the sky that you have to die to go and live. Heaven is here now, this moment. And what is heaven? Heaven is living in the consciousness of God. Remember I mentioned that your house is your world. is your consciousness. Heaven is when you live in the God consciousness. What is the God consciousness? The God consciousness is knowing that your mind is God. Your mind is spirit. You were created in God's pure essence, pure nature and likeness. And that likeness and nature is God's pure nature and is God's real self. That is God himself manifested in you. And if you live from that place, that this is what your mind is, then you are able to guarantee happiness for yourself, because you'll be living from a world of completeness, a world of perfection, wholeness, where everything is perfect and beautiful. So it is for that reason that I want to introduce to you this story of God, of who God is, and propose to you how to end your suffering and live a happy life when you live from this mind that I have just told you, which is God. So if